Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's so good to be back with you on our Connection from Here conversations. And it is wonderful because I have Rhiana with us again today. And what is even more special than having Rhiana is Rhiana has brought a friend. So, Rhiana, would you please tell us about who you have with you today?
Absolutely. Hi, Ashley. It's good to be here. And hi, listeners. I have the pleasure of introducing a dear friend, Mary Hoefler. After finding herself on stage during an expanded state of consciousness, Mary decided that it was about time to get writing and start talking. She found herself on the Moth storytelling stage for the first time in July of 23 and has never looked back. She's a 6-time Story Slam winner and has also been showing up on all sorts of local venues in Chicago, including Outspoken, Louder Than a Mom, This Much Is True, First Person Live, Do Not Submit, and Teller's Night. Although storytelling is clearly in her DNA, it doesn't pay the bills. So Mary spends her days as a psychotherapist, encouraging her clients to get loud and share their own stories without any edits. Because why edit who we are? I am so excited she's here. I first encountered Mary 2 years ago when we were students at Naropa University, getting our certificates in psychedelic assisted therapy. And during our initial 5-day retreat, Mary got up in front of our cohort of 120 folks and shared what it was like at our age to feel invisible and how challenging that can be for someone who'd struggled their whole life with wanting to be seen and to be picked. I knew immediately that this woman was someone I could connect to, and we have since fostered a very meaningful friendship. And Mary, I'm so glad to have you on our podcast as our guest today. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I am also really, really excited to be here.
It is our pleasure, such a joy. When Rhiana told us that you were going to be able to join us, and my heart was lifted. I thank you so much.
Of course.
I have just found Mary to be someone who, because of her amazing ability at storytelling, she just really brings forward who she is. And so that's what I hope we get to experience with her today.
More people than ever are stepping away from organized religion. So where do we turn for support, meaning, and connection? Hi friends, and welcome to Connection from Here, finding community in a changing world. I'm Michelle Perry.
And I'm Ashley Beatty Perry.
We're so happy you're here.
And Mary, I think that's the piece that I want to find out so much about, that storytelling has been such a it has played such a crucial, pivotal role in your life. And I really would like to learn more about that so our listeners can have that meaningful experience as well. And I wanted to start off by asking you, because in kind of reading more about you, I was really curious to know about, in your growing up, what role did community or maybe a lack thereof?
Yes.
How did community or a lack thereof affect you in your childhood, would you say?
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I was thinking about that. And to give a little bit of perspective, I am a first generation woman. My parents were both immigrants from Europe. They came separately after the war. And I didn't really know a lot about this until I started doing deeper work, meaning the psychedelic work. I had been in and out of therapy probably for over 35 years, trying to understand why I don't feel good, why I don't feel enough, like those sort of themes. And I finally came to understand much more about that. So my parents were part of a very large immigrant community in the greater Milwaukee area, and gatherings and always spending time together with family, and then people that weren't really family, but you called them aunt and uncle in German. It's this notion of community was so important to my parents, and it's their survivors. So I think if we understand people with a survivor mentality, it is very much about staying connected and celebrate living. And I think what was hard as a child is I was surrounded by all this, and Rhiana and I have talked a lot about this, there was always this sense of misalignment, like I didn't feel like I fit and very much wanted to fit. But what fitting meant in my family, in my community back in Milwaukee, was to be nice and to smile and to not really be anything different, to be of service. And I'm not knocking service, like go serve people, but the idea also is, what does it feel like for me? So I watch the women in my family be of service to the men and take care of everything and everyone everywhere all the time. And I found myself questioning that, but nowhere to ask those questions. So always having people around, again, with this sort of survivor mentality, they were just grateful to be alive, and that was enough. And I knew at some age that that was not enough for me, was just to live. There had to be more, and the connection needed to feel different. Does that frame it a little bit?
Oh, it does. Mary, that makes so much sense to me. And we've talked some before in the podcast about, there really is the sense that you can be surrounded by people, but if you are not feeling the ability to be your authentic self and have your
Yes.
authentic self kind of seen and accepted and valued, and feel like you matter in that community, that somehow, yes, it's community, but then there's a sense in which it's not entirely so. You don't feel that community in your body.
That was my experience, exactly what you described.
Yeah.
I think for my mother, her family, the great aunts and uncles, that was for them. And I think the issue of feeling different than,
Yeah.
like, I wanted to fit. I wanted to be a part of this culture. I went to German school on the weekends with all the other immigrant children, and all we did was complain. Like, none of us wanted to be German. None of us wanted to speak German. Our parents had accents and were weird and were not educated. And it's really hard as a child. And I think we would all agree, it's that children, they don't understand the difference between belonging and fitting. And that is something my hope is that adults understand. Brene Brown talks about that, right? Rhiana, I see you nodding. It's like, but as a child, you just want to fit. You don't want to be too different. You don't want to be an outlier. And I can honestly say that I have spent my life trying to fit, trying to be picked. If you wanted me to be a shade of blue, I would, even if blue is not my color. You know what I mean? It's like, and I learned a lot in the last probably 4 years, that the hunger was really for belonging and not for fitting. And also, I think this notion of how is one loved in their families. And I listened to Rhianna's podcast as well. And it's like, how are we loved in our families? If it's based on, it's like, if it's performative, if you get a good grade, if you're nice because you shoveled or whatever, it's so meaningless. Like, I do believe that we are all entitled to be loved just because here we are, not because of what I do or that I got a good grade. And that was also very confusing for me as a child. And so I sought love outside of my family, probably starting in second grade, where this idea of being a teacher's pet. This teacher loved me, I was seen, and that continued certainly through elementary school and high school and probably into my adult years of, what do you need me to be so you'll like me, love me, pick me, value me, because I could not do that on my own.
That's right. And Rhiana, you were resonating with that.
Oh, yeah. I think that whole being nice, or in my case, being quiet. Not being emotional, it lays down some tracks that we spend our lives unpacking. And I know it greatly impacts where we find ourselves landing. And so I'm curious, Mary, if for you, like, you heard my episode, so you know about how I landed in communities that weren't good for me. How would you say that kept leading you through into your adult life?
Oh, I think trying to force relationships or shoehorn myself into love relationships that weren't good for me, where I had to sort of abandon myself. And I recently was reflecting, I've been married and divorced twice, once to a man and once to a woman. And I was reflecting on it recently and actually had the ability or an opportunity to have a conversation with both of them this month, which is kind of fascinating, that I showed up in those marriages with a very big job description for them, which basically said, you need to give me worth, You need to never leave me. You need me to feel like I'm enough. I mean, and the list went on. And I was able to say to each of them, no one would have signed up for that. I didn't even know it back then, but I was needing them to make me whole. And I know that I see that even in my own work as a therapist, especially with women of all ages, that our relationships give us worth, our roles give us worth, instead of I show up in this world with an open heart and that is it, that I don't need anyone else to give me worth today. But man, I spent most of my life doing that. Like amen on that,
Yeah.
right? Rhiana, I see the hand.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
it led me to those places, or staying in jobs that were toxic and not good for me out of fear. And I think
Yeah.
when fear is the driver, and I'll talk a little bit about how that maybe relates to the storytelling community and how I found that, but fear keeps us stuck and
Yeah.
small and not in the light. And I think I
Yeah.
spent most of my life, I mean, I'm 61 years old, trying to figure it out, talk it
Yeah.
out, and I just never quite got there.
And Mary, I am resonating so much with what you're saying too. It's so interesting because to situate this, as you described your family's
Yeah.
experience, the immigrant experience, that community was enough for them.
Yes.
It really met their needs. They felt fulfilled. So I think in some ways it makes it even harder when you're surrounded by people who do seem like, well, this is enough. This
Yeah.
community is enough. This way of being is enough. And so to be a child and then growing up in the context of that, when everybody around in the larger family seemed to be just fine. And so
Mm-hmm.
it almost feels even
Mm.
more isolating to say, okay, what is going on for me that
Yeah.
this does not feel authentic to me. I don't feel
Yeah.
like I can be myself here. I mean, I can see that in some ways when you're surrounded by a large community who are finding fulfillment in that community, it can be even more isolating, to say, this is
Yes.
not who I am.
Right. And I think there's a couple things that you said in there, Ashley, is that fine is no longer good enough for me. So
Yeah,
being
yeah,
fine, things are
yeah,
fine, is kind of bullshit. Like, don't I
yeah,
deserve better
yeah.
than fine? So that's the first
That's
piece.
right.
I think the second
That's
piece
right.
is I can't tell you if any of that giant community that I grew up with had fulfillment. So when
Yeah,
you understand about people that survive catastrophic, horrific
yeah,
trauma, it's not about self fulfillment, it's just
yeah,
about survival. I was the first one to go to college. So
yeah,
let's put it in some perspective. My mother cleaned house and put money in a mattress. My father was a cabinet maker, and all the other men were in trades or factory workers. My grandmother cleaned house until she couldn't anymore. My mom's sister cleaned house. It's like, how does a child in that environment think that they're deserving of anything
yeah,
different? Look at that. Even though my parents would say, Mary, we want you to get educated, but they could offer me nothing else. Nothing. Being a teacher or a nurse or a social worker were like the options. And I want to be clear that I don't have resentment or any kind of blaming toward my parents. There's been profound forgiveness and healing around that. But it's hard to be a child in that when you think, God, why would I
yeah.
deserve? Why would I get to have more?
That's right. And Rihanna, I see you nodding your head as well. The ability to almost feel like I matter enough to have
Yeah.
I matter, my own path here matters, and me
Hmm.
finding a space where I can be fully me matters. Yeah.
Like that's the whole point of this podcast, and that's the whole reason why Mary's our guest today, is because all of this gives us a story, but
Hmm.
not just to tell the story. And Mary, I hope you'll go on about this, is
Hmm.
the excavation that you've
Mm.
done
Yeah.
about yourself in order to tell the story out loud.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's so multi-layered, all the
Hmm.
things that impacted us as children, that created narratives,
Yes.
there it is, storytelling
Yeah.
narratives that we followed until we realized this isn't my narrative.
It doesn't
That's
work
right.
anymore. And yes,
That's right.
Rihanna, I believe that, and as a therapist, obviously I make my living as that. I think there is lots of room for people to talk about their story and what happened to them and for them, and not in a victim kind of way,
Yeah.
but just to really understand what's happened to me, and this is why I show up in the world as I do, right? Because of where I come from. And honestly, and Rhiana, in my bio, 4 years ago, I started working with a practitioner in California to do psychedelic medicine work because I have talked and talked and talked and still hit that wall of stuckness, of not enoughness, and I couldn't understand. And I'm not talking about trying to reach for sustained happiness. I have no illusion that that is such a thing. I think we tap into joy whenever we can, hopefully daily. But this idea that I just wanted to feel different, and that starting that work is what opened me up to start writing and talking. And in the journey that I mentioned, I showed up on stage and I got home that end of May after our Naropa beginning. At that particular journey, I found myself on stage and I said, I need to go be on stage. And I wrote a story, and The Moth is something through public radio. They give you a theme, you write a 5-minute story that you memorize, and then you put your name in a hat, and you may or may not get called. And I got called the very first time that I went by myself sitting in the Lincoln Hall Theater in Chicago, and I didn't understand I didn't understand any of it. But my name got called, and I told a story about my anxiety and sweating. So it's kind of funny. But I think my storytelling, and Rhiana knows this because I've been sharing some of the clips, and I shared a few of the stories with you guys today, is that it really is this idea of connecting to humanity. I think all of us have stories like the ones I tell. The difference is I decide to go stand on a stage and say them out loud. And I do believe so many of my stories open up people to think, wow, I'm not the only one. Wow,
Yes,
I'm not as fucked up as I thought I
that's
was.
right.
You know, it's like,
That's right.
it is really this notion of connecting to humans. I believe we spend too much time plugged in, disconnected. People that walk their dogs. So I live in Chicago in this great neighborhood, headphones, earphones, sunglasses. We are disconnected from humanity. And I think the
Yeah.
storytelling has helped me be more connected. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting story about being seen as well. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to the Grand Slam on Thursday. It is 1,000-person theater. I've never stood in front of that many people, and I have some anxiety. Like, the little theaters of 200 people are really easy. This is and I've wanted this, but oh my God, right? But it's a very funny story that I'm going to be sharing about my daughter and her sexual curiosity, because my 5-minute sex talk with my mom in the 5th grade did absolutely nothing to inform me about anything. Zero. Like, it's like swinging in the wind, snooping through the World Book Encyclopedia, snooping through like the babysitting porn that I found, like at my neighbors. Like, it is funny and poignant, but how many parents struggle to talk to their children about sexuality and feelings, and that there's nothing wrong with it?
I love it. And Mary, one of the things I'm hearing too, it's so fascinating to me that it's almost like your individual mining of your own story has led
Mm,
you to a community of now
yes,
sharing the story. And there's
yes.
something like in the particular is the
Hmm.
universal. So as
Hmm.
we talk
Mm,
about like, here's where your early years of starting out in this type of community, and it
yeah.
felt very, as an individual, you felt that, there's loneliness in that and trying to
Oh,
figure,
yes.
but somehow as you have done the work to understand yourself and know your own story, it's fascinating to me that you're talking about, here's 1,000 people, here is a community. Please say more, if you don't mind, about this journey into storytelling for you, and,
Hmm.
and how that has landed you in places that you probably did not anticipate when you just started figuring out your own story.
I would have never thought, I think it was July of 23 or June of 23 when I told my first story. And then with The Moth, anyways, if you win, which is a whole, it doesn't even matter, but if you win a small story slam, you eventually go on to this bigger thing. But I think what it did, it allowed me also to connect with other people who want to find their voice. And I think especially for women, voice suppression, feeling suppression, wearing a mask, pretending, but we all know here that there's such a difference between being nice and being kind, right? And so in this community, the veil of niceness is removed and people get to show up in their messy selves. I have met some of the kindest people in this community who see me and I don't feel judged. And I think spending a lifetime of worrying of how will other people see me? What will they think of me if I say this, if I don't do that, if I wear that? And I don't feel that in this community. It's almost like anything goes. In Chicago especially, I will tell you, before the pandemic, there must have been storytelling, open mics, and curated shows almost every night of the week in all the different neighborhoods. The pandemic really shifted that and it's starting to come back. But I mean, I went to a 3-day retreat last April. I can't go this year, of just all these storytellers, local storytellers working on their craft, hearing from experts about their own journey to get there. It's been lovely. And I will also say about community, sometimes it is awfully hard to be alone. So as someone that is an unmarried, unpartnered person, I live in Chicago, my children are elsewhere. It's an interesting experience also being with self and being in solitude and understanding the difference between aloneness and loneliness and how sometimes the two bump into each other. It's like, what is this? What am I experiencing? It feels dysregulated, but I don't know what it is. And can I just be there? Because my old way, certainly through my 20s and 30s and probably into my 40s, was planning, over planning, always an activity, gotta go, gotta call. And now learning that as well into my 60s is I can be in solitude and be not just fine, but more than that, and have this community that I'm building in Chicago, right?
Oh, that is so good.
I think that's so beautifully put. And Ashley, you said something before Mary shared all that that I just want to name, which is the particular being universal. Like what you're talking about, going on stage in front of 1,000 people, but you're also broadcast. You know, The Moth is a podcast. And so you're actually in front of millions of people. And I think the gift of what we're doing here, these conversations on this podcast, your storytelling on that podcast, you're sharing personal stories that others can identify with. And part of it is because you're doing it so bravely and you're really sharing intimate and authentic stuff. And that you're connecting to humanity on such a large level. And so for the solo person, unpartnered at home alone, you know, who struggles finding community, that's an amazing thing to be able to listen to something that can be so profoundly connecting.
Yes.
And we're all looking for connection. And so what a beautiful gift that you have uncovered for yourself that you're sharing, you know, with vast numbers of people. It's And
Rhiana, and you know this, I never saw this as I was leaving Colorado and moving. It just really seemed to show up, if that makes sense. And I think the showing up, I was at a place where I was open enough to go, and be curious. And I think for me, one of the gifts has been, can I navigate this living through a curious lens instead of a lens of fear, right? With anything of life, of taking a risk. And we get very protective of our heart. Rhiana and I talk, so it's like we get protective. And if I want to live whole and full, I need to be a curious observer without judgment, without that narrator that kind of can show up and sabotage sometimes. And the storytelling for me, you're right, Rhiana, it has been, I can't tell you the amount of people that come up to me after a story and be like, oh my God, Mary, I could totally relate. Right? And it's funny and it's tragic sometimes at the same time, right? It's like we have to look for the lightness sometimes in the darkness, because there is so much to learn in darkness, but I really have had to look for the light in that, if that makes sense, right?
Oh, it makes such perfect sense. And Mary, I'm thinking too, I don't know, for those of us who have felt invisible
Mm,
and not seen at so many, in so many places in our lives and growing up, there comes from that an almost unique ability to see and better hear the stories of others. So there's something
mm,
about, I wonder if, it is like in that kind of coming into young adulthood, you are highly attuned to the stories of others because you know
mm.
what it was like to not feel like your story was, even there. Like where,
Right,
who is to hear my story? Who am I?
right.
Who is to hear? And where do I belong? And would you say that that is true for you? As I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something it seems to me to be somebody who has experienced the invisibility, in other words, the
Mm.
feeling of invisibility, to now can see so clearly into here's a person who really needs space to share their story.
I think, Ashley, that makes total sense. And one of the things, as a therapist, we hold space for people just to show up as they are. And I
Yeah.
tell people that all the time. Someone will say, God, I'm not showered today, or it's like, you don't need to be any different than you are when you and I clock in at the top of the hour. There's this worry that if I'm not whatever, groomed right or look right or not smiling. And so sometimes I think the process of therapy is a way for people to start getting comfortable with just how they show up without judgment. Sometimes I even wonder, like, am I really even a good therapist? Because that imposter shit kind of creeps in. But I have to tell you, like, people keep coming. So I think, okay, this is doing something. But sometimes it's just about someone else seeing you without judgment, that says, just please come as you are with all of your things. We all have the things. And Rhianna's seen most of my stories that were able to get recorded. It's like they're so relatable because we all have things. I told a story earlier this month at a big bar near my neighborhood. It's one of the largest gay bars in the country, and they do a once a month storytelling thing. And I talked about, wouldn't it be interesting if we just, as we look for love, just put all of our things out there? Instead of, like, I like long moonlit walks and a good Cabernet or whatever. It's like nobody cares. We all like the moon. You know what I mean? But one of the things I said is, having lived a life with a narrator that basically said, see me, pick me, love me, value me, that means I give up myself in order for that to happen.
That's right.
And if there's anything I can do along the way, certainly with clients or in storytelling, to say, you don't have to do that. You don't need to wait till you're 60 years old to be like,
That's right.
I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like this, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I brought this woman on this show.
Yes.
That's it right
That's
there, right? Like that's the message.
Yeah.
that is.
Come as
Well,
you are, right?
okay.
Hell yeah.
And how rare, what a rare, rare gift, as you're mentioning, Mary. And I continue to hold up the large community you were surrounded
Mm,
with growing up, because I think, as people are yearning for
mhm.
connection with each other as we do, but it's not just that, we are yearning to come as we are. And so,
Yes.
the understanding of, like, yes, here I sit in this, large group of people, and it makes sense that some people are still feeling like this is not a place where all of me is accepted. This is not a place where all of me is valued. This is not a
Right.
place where I can bring my messy self and sit
Correct.
here and also be cared for, to say, yes, you still belong. Even in
Correct.
your messiness, you still belong here. And I think that was the disconnect, because on the podcast, so many of us have talked about whether that large community was maybe a religious organization, or
Mm-hmm.
whether that large community was a cultural organization.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of us who have been in communal settings before, but still sit there and feel like, where can I go to be me and to be valued as me? And so I think what you're talking about, Mary, is such a rare gift, in this world, that people can find these spaces to say, what is your story? I
Yeah.
want to hear the real you, and I want all of that. And your story is safe here.
And Rhiana said it earlier as well, is that children know at a very young age what they can and cannot bring. It's like they show up in this family, and I do believe that. So being loud or angry or sad or saying no, many children have no agency to do any of that. So we smile and nod and agree and know how fucked up it is. And I had to leave. So I think for many of us, the minute I turned 18, I had to leave. I went to college, and then I moved as far away as I could to California from Milwaukee, short of going to Hawaii, right? And I needed to leave to find out that I could figure it out, because that community, it's family, but I think I've also learned, and I think you'd all agree, that family is chosen for many of us.
Yeah,
Just
that's right.
because
That's right.
this is a parent or a sibling, family for me has been a chosen family for decades. I don't fit into my family, and that I feel guilty about that sometimes, because I'm not like them. I don't vote like them. I don't go hunting and kill animals. Like, let's just go down the damn list. But as children and even a young adult, I so wanted to fit into that. They all are Catholic Church people. They vote how I don't, right? It's just wild. And because we want that connection. So we're talking about, even though that community didn't feel right for me, even as adult, I'd go back and try, like to go to the barbecue, to go to the family reunion. And it's like, oh, I don't know. They don't know me. I just smile. Yes. Tell me more about your job. Wow. Look at how big your grandchild is. Wow. That's so amazing. I don't give a fuck. And it's like, you just smile and nod and like, okay. And again, at 61, I do have agency to not participate. So creating family has been a huge thing. And I've only been in Chicago a little over 2 years. And that is continuing to unfold for me. Like, what is it going to look like here?
That's right. And Rhiana, this is interesting to me because back in the other episode when we were talking about your story, what Mary just said, that something children know, that because
Oh,
in your story, Rhiana, we hit on like as a child, something about you already knew this larger, space that I'm in does not feel true to me.
yeah.
This does not feel true to me. And so I think it's so fascinating that when you get to the place where you've got agency as an adult to explore that on your own, that Mary, for both you and Rhiana, it leads you to a different type of community. I mean, the search has been for, okay, here's what was, but the search is, where does my story fit now? Is there a place for my individual story to sit in a larger space and to be welcome there and to be, accepted and cared for there? And it feels like that seeking and that journey to that that's not easy, Mary, to have found the larger storytelling community. Even, I mean, this is a journey that is the journey to build a community where you are seen and you belong.
That's it.
Is, it's a difficult,
Yes.
yeah.
That's it.
That's
And
the
I,
word.
yes, belong. And I think even as I've gotten to know a few of the people that have become friends, is there's a rawness and an openness that is so refreshing. I don't need to talk to you about the menus at Woody's Pizzeria or whatever. It's like, no, I don't care. But a lot of people, and what I have come to accept, is going there is hard, so hard for most people. So we talk about the weather and the president and policies and the latest this, or what is the new federal whatever. It's so safe for people to talk about, how am I, what do I bring today, is a whole different thing. It's easy to talk about all the noise because it's safe. right?
So good. That's it. There's something. It's vulnerable. It's
Yes.
vulnerable. And Rhiana, you and I hit on that before. I mean, there's vulnerability in saying I am bringing my authentic self in order to get to a community where I feel I matter and I belong. There does have to be some personal vulnerability that gets me there in a way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because
Yeah.
I think, especially after 60, this is this last chapter, right? And I think, the 20 to 60 is the big living and lots of, and then after 60 until whenever, it is this last chapter. And I think to sit in that and wonder, what do I want my life to look like? How do I choose to live and show up? And
Yeah.
for me, it is about writing and telling and being creative in that way. And I don't know what comes next. I have a friend that always says, Mary, Netflix, it waits for no one. You know what I mean? So I don't know, right?
That you're talking about that one woman show that we're all waiting for you to
Yes,
do.
that one woman show. I'm gonna write it and I'll have it done by next year. But this has been a beautiful unfolding for me to kind of get to know these people, and they talk about the hard things. They talk about their stories, their family stories, their neglect, their trauma, and it's often delivered in a way with some character and lightness, but who can't relate in some way to
That's
some of
right.
these pieces of all
That's
of our
right.
stories? Seriously.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, and you just did a beautiful job bringing all that to the listeners on this podcast. I mean, I just think what you've shared here is going to be really powerful for folks to listen to.
Thanks, Rhianna. It's been lovely to
Absolutely.
be
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah.
Oh my stars. Well, Mary, I thank you so much. It just, like you said, the specific is the universal, and it just,
Yes.
in allowing ourselves to come into our own story, it then better allows us to hear the stories of another. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
something about when I am okay and have come into my story, I am now better able to listen, to the
Mm-hmm.
authentic story of another. I just thank you for the
Yeah.
work you are doing to bring that forward.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think just sort of a last thought would even be like, for people to be mindful as you navigate the day, right? You never know what has happened to or for someone when you bump into them wherever you do. And I think part of it is, can we get out of our own way? Can we get out of our own way and release our fear to really start living whole? So,
Oh, Mary, that's so good. That leads us. I was going to mention to you our final segment. We call it a step from here, which is like something
did I
that we all can.
overstep? I think I
No,
overstepped from here.
you did
That's what
not.
it was.
I was going to, exactly. I was going to mention that it is something that we can apply, carry with us in the
Hmm.
week ahead about how can we build this connection with each other? How can we bring
Yeah.
deeper care to our relationship? And I love what you're saying about, one thing we can do is make room for the
Yeah.
stories of others. As you mentioned,
Yeah.
as you're going about your day, everybody is going with their own story. And so to
Hmm.
give some room for that, to
Yeah.
allow for this person, it may be a very difficult part of the story for them, and allow that. It seems like that can build connection among people, allowing for that.
Yes. And to probably sort of a final thought would be what you're talking about is also, can we give each other some grace? Because we are all complex and messy and imperfect, and we never know what is happening to the people around us, to like, can I give that
That's right.
person grace?
Gosh, Mary, thank you. It's like, it's what it comes down. Can we give ourselves grace? Can we give ourselves
Each
grace?
other. Yeah.
Can we give each other grace? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
What a beautiful thing. Oh, Mary, thank you again so much. And Rhiana, thank you for grabbing Mary and putting
Oh,
her in front of the mic for us. Thank you.
thank, thank you
Thank you
both.
both.
What a treat
Thank you
this has
also.
been.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, as Rhianna knows, I have so many words. Like we could probably sit here for a very long time. So many words.
We'll look forward to
Oh,
more of your words when we all tune into the moth.
That's right. That's right. Although I have to
absolutely.
just say, they don't put me on the radio because I really appreciate profanity, and so they typically don't air those. It might be on the podcast, but it's not on the radio because my appreciation for the F word is just, it is really the perfect word of emphasis for anything and everything. Maybe that's the takeaway. So I don't know.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. Well, and Mary, we will link you in the show notes so everybody can know where to go and find you. And thank you
Perfect.
again.
You
Oh,
guys, thank you so much. Yes.
thank you. Listeners will connect again soon.